Bez Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Bava Metzia Daf Chof Aleph. Bez Hashem, I'm going to begin Elu Mitzias in a moment. I just wanted to go through the last piece of Gemara of the first parak of Bava Metzia, which we're going to start from Daf Chof Amud Beis, about just second line from the wide lines. Em yesh Allah aleim simpoinis yasam asher simpoinis. In other words, if the Mishnah says that if a guy finds a loan document in his possessions that somebody owes him money, but he also finds the receipt for that document. So if he finds the receipt for the document, then you have to assume that it's paid. Why should a receipt be by you? It should be by the loiva. It should be by the borrower. Maybe the borrower, you didn't get around to give it to the borrower. So therefore, the receipt ended up by you. Don't collect from this document. That's what the Mishnah says. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Barabba Amarav, Simpin hayotzim tachas yedei malva. If you find a receipt by the lender, even if you wrote it with your own handwriting, it's a joke. Don't discount the receipt, and uposel, the receipt is invalid, and you have to, and therefore we assume that the loiva did not pay the loan, because if he did pay the loan, he should have the receipt. That's what Rav said, and that's a direct contradiction of our Mishnah, which we'll see in a minute. But he said, Loi meboya, not only that, kosab ksav yadai sofer, the ikalamem sofer yisram leiv kosab. It doesn't matter if the receipt was written by a special sofer. So it just so happened the sofer wrote it up, and you were still holding on to it. But the loan was not paid. Even if you wrote it with your own handwriting, posel, we assume that it's not a correct receipt. Why did you write a receipt if the loan was not paid? Savar, you thought to yourself, maybe the borrower is going to show up on Friday afternoon, the kaparali, and he's going to want to pay me. If I'm not going to give him a receipt, he's not going to give me the money. I'm going to write the receipt now. When he brings me the money, I'm going to give it to him. So we see that this that was this cheshbon of writing a receipt, although the loan was not paid. So comes along the Gemara and asks a question from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah seems to say, now we learned in our Mishnah, if you find a receipt amongst your documents, simpoinus is a receipt that was not yet given to the borrower, so then you should assume that the loan is paid. Rav disagreed with that. How could Rav argue in our Mishnah? Answers the Gemara, Rav Safra qualified our Mishnah. It's not only that you found a receipt amongst your loan documents, but the loan document itself was like in the garbage pail. It's next to your other stars that are ripped up, even though this one is not yet ripped up. So we can assume that why do you put this star with a shoiver in your old documents? It must be that this loan was paid. Rab Safra said it somewhere else, but this is what you applied, that you found the receipt and the document where amongst your ripped up shtaris. Toshma, come in here. Ninselecha ben shtaris Yosef ben Shimon Perua, shtaris shneim Peruim. Again, the Mishnah Brisa says that if you find in Bava Basra, if you find two shtaris that you lent money to Yosef ben Shimon, and you have that they're paid up, right? That you assume that both receipts are valid, and therefore both Yosef ben Shimon, you can't prove which Yosef ben Shimon's loan was paid up. So you see that you validate the receipt. And this, it was found amongst your stars that were ripped up, and therefore you validate the receipt is a valid receipt. Toshma, come in here. Two Yosimim. One Yosem is the borrower, and one Yosem is the lender. The lender says, I found amongst my documents that your father owed my father money. So they take a shvua that my father never told us that this was a paid document, and therefore you have to still pay us. So the question is, and they have to say that we didn't find a receipt. So, but it must be that if there was a receipt, you rely on the receipt. It means they found it amongst if they found it amongst their ripped up shtares, then only then is the receipt valid. Other than that, the receipt is not valid. Again, all same idea that a person who lends money to other people validates, sometimes writes a receipt, even though before the loan is paid. Tashma, come in here. Simpan sheshel ve'edim iskayim b'choismav, a receipt that has edim. If you know that the people that signed on the receipt are, real people, then it's kosher. It's a kosher receipt. So we see it's easy to receipt is kosher, even though it was not in the hands of the loiva. It doesn't mean that the receipt is kosher. We go to Chaf Alma Aleph. The Shalina Lasade, you ask the witnesses that signed on the shtar, on the receipt, Iprua, was it actually paid up? Did they see that the loiva paid? Eloi Perua, or they did not see the loiva pay, and whatever they say, that's how you trust it. Other than that, that's what it means. Hashma, come in here. Simpin sheashal of Edim, kosher. So we see a simpin, if it has Edim on it, it's automatically kosher. And Rob said a simpin is automatically, if it's found by the malva, is puzzle. So Gemara says, my edim edikiyam. It means that it was ratified, it was authenticated by Bezdin. Bezdin will not authenticate a receipt unless it was actually paid. So in addition to edim on it, it had also a seal from Bezdin that Bezdin says this is a kosher document. This makes perfect sense. Make turning seifa, all of edim puzzle. If it doesn't have edim on it, the receipt is posel. What does it mean it doesn't have edim? There's no edim on the receipt. Of course it's possible. If you have no edim, so then how do you know it's real? Elalav, it does have edim, but what we're asking is edikim. Was it, in addition to having edim, was it validated as an authentic document by Bezdin? So if it doesn't have that, then it's possible. But if it does have it, then it's a kosher. Even Rav would agree that it's a kosher receipt, even if it's found by the malva. One more piece, gufa, simpim sheshel, edim, yuskayim b'choismov. If you have a receipt that has edim, then if it's authenticated by the signatures, then you trust them. You ask them, was the loan paid or not? You just ask the edim who signed on this receipt, was the loan paid? Ein olav edim, if this doesn't have edim on the receipt, the yitzim metachas shlish, or sheyitz lachet chitim shtaris kosher. If you find the receipt not by the lender, but it's by a third party, so then basically the lender trusted the third party, and if the third party says that the document was not paid up, then you believe the third party. Or suppose they wrote a receipt on the bottom of a shtar, so it's automatically kosher. If it's not a separate piece of paper, then the receipt is kosher if it's written on the bottom of a shtar. If it wasn't really paid up receipt, then why would somebody write at the bottom of the shtar a receipt that automatically is messing up the shtar, the loan document? So the fact that they wrote it at the bottom of the loan document automatically tells us that this receipt was valid, and indeed the loan was paid up, despite that the receipt is not in the possession of the borrower. So we finished Be'ez Hashem, the first parak of the Metzia. Now we go to the second parak. The following, if you find something on the floor, you're allowed to keep it. And other things that you find on the floor, you have to make an announcement that it was lost. Why would you allow to keep something that somebody else lost? Probably it was made hefker because he gave up hope that he's ever going to find it. So the Mishnah gives you a couple examples. The following things, if you find it, you're allowed to keep it. Matzah, peres mufuzarim. If you find fruit spread out all over the ground, so then you can assume that the owner gave up hope, and these are hefker. You're allowed to keep it. The owner gave up his ownership on those fruits. Mois mufazaris. If you have coins just thrown around in the street and there's no sign on it, so then it's hefker, and therefore you're allowed to pick it up and keep it. Kriches b'reshus harabim. If you have small bundles in the reshus harabim, or v'igulei tevela, or a round fig, so they don't have a distinct mark on them. Kikar shel nachdam, a regular baker's bread, which he bakes the same type of bread. Everybody. Macharoizes shel dogim. If you find a string of fish, so there's again no distinct mark on them. So when the guy lost it, he lost it and gave up hope. So if you found it, you're just receiving it from Hefker, and you're allowed to keep it. V'chaticha shel bachar and a piece of meat. V'gizei tzemar and sharings of wool. Al kuchem imidirasan that are taken from their country. Vanitze pishtan, and also a group, like a bundle of flax. Ulshainis shalagomon, and tongues of purple wool, dyed wool. Anyway, all these things that you find, the common examples of things that were around in the time of the Mishnah. So somebody's walking on the street and finds these items. Harei l'shlo, he's allowed to keep it because the owner gave it was miyayish, divrei meir. Rabbi Yehuda just adds, Kol sheyesh b'shino, if it has a distinct mark, chayv lahachras, then you have to announce it. Now, it's not a distinct mark if something's different about it. Ketzad, he gives you an example. Matzel eagle, you find a eagle is a round cake of figs. Let's just call it up. Let's say you call a round cake of figs. Here it is. Sorry, you call a round cake of figs. 7. Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't have it. I don't have a good picture of it. But basically, you have a round cake of figs. Oh, here it is, and right inside the figs there is a piece of like a little little jug there. Or you found a piece of bread, and inside there's money. So normally people don't put money inside bread. So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you find a kika of seichamois, then you're not allowed to keep it because the guy made it something different about his bread, and therefore you're not allowed to keep it. Call kli anpuria, any keli that's an anpuria keli that's brand new. Find a brand new keli, ein chayiv lahachris, because obviously if you find it in a box, an Amazon box, and there's no address on it. So the owner doesn't know, the owner probably never had time to use it. So therefore, it's as if he was mafkarit. Matzah peiros mufuzare and bekama. The Mishnah says if you find fruits spread out, how much fruits is spread out that you can assume that the owner was mafkir? So the Gemara says, Rav Yitzchak kav ba'arba amas. A guy threw a kav in 4 amas. Kav is, let's say, a liter of fruits, and it's spread out over a place of 4 amas. So let's just maybe bring it up. Right. Here we go. Right. Yeah. So here it is. You have a whole bunch of fruits, and it's all spread out of 4 amas by 4 amas. That's the pick. So if you find that, then you can assume that the guy was mafkarit. So the Gemara says, "Hey chidami, how's that? What's the case? If you can see that it was accidentally fell from somebody, afila tuvanami, even if there was a lot there, why shouldn't you allow to pick it up? Because it was definitely the guy dropped it and is not coming back for it. But if you can tell that the guy placed it in such a way that it's clear that he set it up, let's say in the box in 4 different piles, right, in the dollar by dollar square box, it's clearly that it was placed there on purpose, so that the guy's coming back. I feel about even if it's less than a kav in 4 amas namila, you shouldn't be allowed to keep it. Answers the Gemara, right? Answers the Gemara. Amarab ukva bar chama b'mechnashu devei ori askin, and we're talking about a threshing hold place where everybody comes there, threshes their wheat, and then they leave. Kav ba'arba amas. So if you find a kav of wheat, let's say in 4 amas, the nafish turchaya, it's such a big bother to clean it up. Loi tarach inish, a person will not bother to pick it up. He's not going to come take it. Why? Because it's too much of a bother. Afkuri mafkilahu, he was mafkirit. But if it's less than that, so then if let's say you have a smaller amount, so tarach v'hada asav shakel, he's going to come back and take it. V'loi mafkilahu, then he's not going to be mafkirit. So it's a distinct place where the Mishnah is talking about that if you find kav ba'arba amas, so then you can keep it, but less you can't keep it. So boy Rabbi asked the question, chatzi kav b'shtei amas. Let's say you halved it, half a kav in 2 amas, by 2 amas. So kav ba'arba amas time of my. What's the reason by a kav ba'arba amas? You don't. It's considered hefker Mishum de nafesh tirchaya, because it's a big bother to pick it up. Chatzi kav b'shtei amas, but if you have a half a kav in 2 amas, so you have less and in a smaller place. Kivin the loy nafesh tirchaya, it's not such a big bother to clean it up. Loy mafkalu, the owner is not going to be mafkarid, and he's going to come back and retrieve it. Dilma, or maybe mishum de loy cheshivi. It's not worth anything. How much is a half a kav, a half a liter of little wheats? Since it's not important, it's not a huge amount of money, mafkalahu, the person will make it hefker. Then the Gemara says, kabayim b'shmoina amas mahu. What happens? You have 2 kavs in 8 by 8 amas. Kava ama amas, if you have a kav in a 4 by 4, that there it's hefker, time of mine, mishum the nafesh turchayu is a big bother. The kolshkein, certainly it will be hefka kabayim b'shmoin amas, 2 kavs and 8 amas, keeping it in fishi to chayet vei mafkalu, since it's spread out and it's more wheat, so therefore it's a person is more mafkaret. Because it's not important, it's not worth a lot. That's why kav ba'arba amas, the person was mafker. But kabayim b'shmoin amas, but 2 kavs in 8 amas, keeping the chashivi, since it's worth a lot, loy mafkalu, the person's not mafkaret. Kav shumshimin ba'arba amas mahu. We're up to daf chaf aleph amud aleph towards the bottom. Kav shumshimin ba'arba amas. A person dropped a kav. A kav again is like a liter of sesame seeds. Sesame seeds are expensive. Ba'arba amas mahu, and you find that on the floor in a square daled by daled amas. Can you keep it? Kaba amas, if it's wheat in 4 amas, time of ma'amshin l'kashivi, because it's not expensive. Wheat is not expensive. V'shum shemin, but sesame seeds, kibin the chashivi, since it's expensive, loy mafkalu, the person didn't make it halfway, so you're not allowed to keep it. It's a big bother to clean it up. And wheat is hard to clean up. That's why the person's mafka wheat kaba amas. The kolshkein certainly shum shemim sesame seeds came in the nafesh to chayu tvei. Since it's a bigger bother to clean up, mafka lehu, his person it does mafka it. So what happens then in this case? Kav tamri ba'arba amas. You have a kav of dates in 4 amas, which is a big item. Kav rimoini ba'arba amas maho. So that you can see it on the picture over here. Let's say here kav dates and fruit. Here you go. You have like these kav rimoini or kav dates. These are big items. Let's say you find it in a dollar amas. It's not so expensive pomegranates, especially in Israel. So maybe a person would mafker it, or maybe not, because it's easy to pick up. So the question is like this. You can say that these calves of pomegranates, of figs that are found in a 4 by 4, since they're not worth a lot of money, the owner was mafkaret. Or maybe if you have little seeds all around, then an owner would be mafkaret, because it's hard to pick up. It's a pain in the neck. You have to get a whole broom. Big fruits like a fig or a pomegranate. It's not hard to pick them up. So maybe maybe the owner is not making it hafka. What would be the din? The Gemara leaves this by an unresolved question. So the Gemara now begins to the famous sugya of Yish Shloi Medas. Itmar we learned Yish Shloi Medas. The guy dropped, let's say here. The guy dropped at 8 o'clock in the morning, he dropped something from his wagon. Okay, you can see it on the picture over here. Then 8:05, somebody picked it up. Now, when the guy would find out that he dropped it, he certainly would be miyayish. But when the guy picked it up, the owner did not give up hope. He didn't know that it was lost. So can the one that picked it up keep it? Abaye says, Lo haviyish, the guy that finds it cannot keep it, because that's not yish. Yish has to be found by the finder after the person was miyayish. So if an unknown yish, if you don't know if he was miyayish, you can't keep it. Rava says havi yish. So now the Gemara explains this machlokes. Bedavish yes by simin kli amal loy pligi loy havi yish. If it has a simin on the item, certainly the guy was not mafkaret. He's not making it a hefker, because it's not. There's certainly no yish there. Even though we heard that he was miyayish, loy havi yish, because it's something that was a siman. originally, probably when he found out that he lost the item, he thought he's going to find it. So therefore, he was never miyayish it initially. So the chiyasa liyadeh. So when the guy picked it up, bisuri the liyadeh, he really had the chiyuv to return it, even though subsequently the person was miyayish. But when the finder found it, he had the mitzvah to return this hashavas aveda. The chiyada the nafel now. The chiyada the nafel when he found out that it fell from him, the person that lost it, loy miyayish, he didn't give up hope. Meima ama, he says to himself, Simon misli begabei, I have a simon, Yavin is simon, I'm going to give a simon, and they're going to return it to me. So basically, you still have that obligation to return an item that you find. In other words, if you find a lost item that has a simon on it, and you didn't know for sure that the owner was miyayish, you have to return the item. That's no machlokes. If you find something at the bottom of the ocean, even though it has a simon, if you went after a shipwreck and you found something that has a simon, so you're allowed to keep it. That's for sure. Keep pligi. What is the machlokes? B'dovish ein by simon. Let's say a guy dropped something that has no simon to it. He dropped, let's say, he dropped a watch, okay? It has no simon. It's a standard watch. So Rabbi says, Lo yahavi yish. It's not yish because when he dropped it, he didn't know that it fell from him. And therefore, when you picked it up, you picked up something that the owner was not yet miyayish. So when the finder picks it up, he has an obligation to do hashavas aveda. Rava says, Havi yish. It is called good yish. Why? Because that's called yish loy medas, Rava says, is yish. Why? Because we know for a certain the chiyada, when he's going to eventually know that he dropped it, the nafal miyayish, he's going to certainly be miyayish. Meima Amma, he says to himself, Simona Leslie Begabe, I have no semen. Mashtu de miyayish, I want to be miyayish right now. So since we know that inevitably the person's going to be miyayish, that the owner is going to be miyayish, so if the finder finds it prior to the knowledge of the owner, that knowing that he lost it, we consider it as if the yish happened already, and the finder is allowed to keep the item. So that is a very fundamental machlokes called yish loy medas. Yish without the knowledge of the owner that he lost it. Abaye says that's not called yish. The Rava says that is called yish. That is called yish, and you're allowed to keep it. So the Gemara brings a couple of questions. Tashma, come in here. Peres mufuzarin. If you find fruits that are spread out on the street, and the Mishnah says you're allowed to keep it. But our Mishnah, maybe he's talking about a case where the guy did not know that it fell from him. So why does our Mishnah say you're allowed to keep fruits that are spread out on the ground? When we're talking about you finding the fruits in the threshold, in a place where as soon as a person leaves, he knows he left some fruits behind. And therefore, it's not a yish shaloi medas, it's a yish medas, and therefore you're allowed to keep it. Tashma, mois mufuzars. You find quarters and coins on the floor, spread out all over the place, you're allowed to keep it. Arelish loy. Amai, why are you allowed to keep it? When a person drops coins, perhaps he didn't know that it fell from him. And yet the Mishnah says you're allowed to keep it. So our Mishnah seems to say, yish loy medas is like yish. So it's a kasha nabaya. And so the Gemara in Hasam Nami, that over there also, as soon as the coin fell from the person, the guy gave up, the guy knows that it fell and he didn't bother to pick it up. It was a couple of pennies, he didn't care. Rabbi Yitzchak says that a person always knows at every given moment what's in his pocket and how much is missing. So a person is in the habit of touching his pocket and his wallet every hour. So basically, as soon as the coins were missing, he knew about it. And he didn't come back to get it because he didn't care for it. So Hachanami, that's what Rabbi Yitzchak said it somewhere else. So we applied that same idea. Hachanami, Adam Asel Mashbis Bekise, Bechal Shavashah, that a person will always touch his wallet every hour and hour. So therefore, we can assume that he knew it fell, and therefore he was right away miyayish. It's not called yish loy medash. Again, tashma, if you find that these a cake of figs and a baker's bread, you're allowed to keep it. Amai, you don't know. How does he know that it fell from him? Maybe the big bread fell from his bag and he didn't even know that it fell. And yet the Mishnah says you're allowed to keep it. Answers the Gemara, Hasanami there also. Agav the Akira made the Yadabahu. Because it's a heavy item, these breads and these cakes of the Vela, since they're heavy, right away you know that it was dropped. The person who lost it right away knew it was dropped, and he just gave up hope. He didn't care to look for it. Says the Gemara, Tashma ulushoinis shel agaman arela shaloi. Says the Gemara v'amai haloyadid the nafal menei. If you find a tongue of purple wool, you're allowed to keep it. But you don't know, wool is a light thing and it falls from you. The owner of that item did not know it fell from him, and yet the finder is allowed to keep it. Answers the Gemara, a person knows it fell from him. Why? Agav the chashivi, because it's worth a lot of money. A person will always touch his pocket to see if he has it, that wool. So as soon as it fell from him, he knew it fell from him, and he was miyayish back then. So that's not yish loy medash. Tashma, one more thing, and then we'll stop. Tashma, come in here. You find money in shul or in a base medrash. If you find it in a movie theater, so hareli shaloi, any place where there's a lot of people, you're allowed to keep it. Because we can assume that the owner gave up hope. Says the Gemara, he didn't know that it fell from him. So why are you allowed to keep it? According to Abaye, you're not allowed to keep it. Yir shaloi medash, lo have a yish. So answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak, and this is where the source of Rabbi Yitzchak says, a person always touches his pocket at every moment, and therefore he actually did know that it fell from him. As soon as it fell from him, he gave up hope from finding it, and therefore the finder who finds it is finding it after the yish of the original owner. So it doesn't enter the machlokes between Abaya and Rava. Okay, we will stop over here.